Hi, this is Hatim Kheir, counsel for the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, with the update for Day 22 of the Public Order Emergency Commission hearings. So today we heard from 4 witnesses, but they testified in 2 panels of 2. So the first panel we heard from had officials from Public Safety Canada. The 2 witnesses were Deputy Minister Rob Stewart and Assistant Deputy Minister David Rochon. Collectively, they test some of the highlights from their testimony. Rob Stewart spoke about an engagement proposal that he worked on. So the idea was this was going to be a proposal that a high-up official from the federal government would meet with protesters and hear their concerns, and in return, influential protesters would denounce illegal activity and tell the other protesters to leave. That engagement proposal eventually made its way up to cabinet, but then was not taken up, and so it was never acted on. They also spoke to some of the intelligence they were receiving from CSIS and the RCMP, both of which report to public safety. Under cross-examination by Brendan Miller, Rob Stewart emphasized, well, first of all, he acknowledged that CSIS did not say that they found a national security threat within the meaning of the CSIS Act. But then when pressed on it, if any agency made a recommendation that the standards under the Act were met, he said that they hadn't been asked. Also, under cross-examination by Rob Kittredge, counsel for the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, he admitted that he thought the emergency powers were helpful in dispelling the protest, but when pressed on any direct knowledge of it, he agreed that it was speculation, though perhaps he quibbled over the word and said he'd call it a conclusion. But he admitted that he didn't have any direct knowledge of it. And this arose from being cross-examined on an email that he was on, where he was talking about speaking notes, and he was advising his colleague to come up with some specific instances of the use of the Act, though he said he was having trouble doing it because it didn't have much benefit. He tried explaining that, saying that he underestimated the usefulness of the Act, but then when pressed on it, said he couldn't come up with specifics. So he said he didn't have direct knowledge of how it actually affected things. After that, we heard from a panel of 2 officials from Global Affairs Canada. There was Cynthia Turmer-Scheusen, who is the Assistant Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, and there was Joseph Comartin, who is the Consul General in Detroit for Canada. Ms. Turmer-Scheusen testified about concerns they were hearing from businesses that were impacted by the movement of goods across the border due to the blockade protest at Windsor, and she and some of the concerns they were hearing from U.S. officials. Interestingly, she said that one of the concerns was that the reputation of Canada abroad was being harmed was because Canadian flags were being flown at other protests around the world. When she was cross-examined by Brendan Miller, she was pressed on what illegal activities she was concerned about. She pointed to the blockade in Windsor. He then asked what was illegal about the protest in Ottawa, and she wouldn't or couldn't name any illegal activity. And then I cross-examined her, and I asked her about the impact of the economic measures order. So that was the emergency order that allowed for the freezing of bank accounts, because she testified in chief that it was important that Canada have a reputation as a good place for investments. So I cross-examined her about the impact that freezing bank accounts would have on Canada's reputation, and her answer was that the bank accounts freezing it didn't affect investors, basically. So that's why it didn't affect the reputation. So that's the summary of today's evidence. We'll have plenty more federal officials coming up this week and then next week. So continue to tune in for more updates as we go forward. Thanks, and I'll talk to you then.